All right, this is 4.5, kind of part two, where we're solving quadratics again, which is just an x squared equation. And the big picture of what we're doing in the remaining part of this chapter is learning different ways to solve. Okay, and so this slide just is a reminder that if you have an x to the first called linear, you can just solve that with your algebra steps. -1, divide by 2, blah, 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 blah. Okay, if you have an x squared, right, you can't always do those algebra steps. So here's a picture of why the algebra steps doesn't work for this question. Okay, and so in the last video we talked about one of the ways to solve an x squared is to factor it. That's what was covered in the last video. Okay, and then this video is going to go over another method called graphing, which is really powerful. It can actually solve like x squareds. You can actually solve x cubes, x to the fourth. So it's kind of a cool method. I used to tell kids I survived most of college just by solving equations using this graph method. All right, so you'll need a graphing calculator for this. If you happen to not have one, you can always use Desmos. Can't use that on the test, but for practice, you can use it. Here I'm going to use my TI 84 to do this lesson, right? Which I think is built into Rapid Identity now too, which is another word calculator that you might have available to you. All right, so here's the steps, which if you want to jot them down, you can take a picture of this or something. But at any rate, you got to get 0 on one side. That was the same as factoring. Then generally this is not a super critical step, but generally you write it with the highest exponent first, called standard form. And then you can use the y equals button on your calculator. So you're going to use y equals here to type in the equation. I'm actually already in that screen. But you'll type y equals and type your equation right there. All right, and then you might have to zoom in and out, and I'll go over that in this video to see where the solutions are. And then this is a way to like find the precise ones. You can always estimate them off the graph, but this is the process for finding them. You have to enter bounds, and then you might have to do this last step 2 times because there's generally 2 answers to a quadratic. All right, so I'm going to start with the one that's right here, x squared plus 2x minus 7. We want to make that equal 0. And it's already got 0 on one side, already in standard form. So we're just going to graph right away here. So I'm just going to type it in my calculator. So again, you want to hit this y equals here. And then here's your x key right here. And then square, you can just square it straight up right here, or you can do this little hat, and 2 will get you any exponent you want. Okay, and then I think it was plus 2x minus 7. All right, and then let's see what it looks like. So we're going to hit graph. Okay, and we get our parabola shape. No surprise there. And then the trick part of this is a couple things. One, if you don't see this, you can try zooming. So the standard window is like 10 by negative 10 by 10 by negative 10. So if you don't see that window, you can go to standard here, and then it should zoom it to that negative 10 to 10, 10 to negative 10 window. All right, and then the solutions, this is kind of a little bit confusing idea, but what we really graphed, what you see there is y equals. So when we typed in y equals that equation, and we want to find then the x, like basically you have a bunch of xy pairs. What you see on your calculator, these are a bunch of xy pairs that fit this equation, y equals x squared plus 2x minus 7. But we are interested in the points where like the x values that'll make y 0, right? Because we essentially want y to be 0, and we want to find what x numbers will make it so that the y comes out as 0. Okay, and that's going to happen on our x-axis. So in a coordinate plane, anywhere on the x-axis, those have y coordinates of 0, right? They have the form x something, y 0, right? So really our solutions are going to be our x-intercepts, right? So our answers to this are going to be right there. So they're going to be about a little bit less than 2 and a little bit more than -4, right? Those are going to be our answers, right? So we could approximate them. We could say they're like -3.9 and like 1.9, but to find them exactly, that's where these steps come in, right? So instead of just guessing or estimating, I'm going to use my calculator to find those actual answers, right? And so to do that, you got to do it one at a time. So I'm going to start with the one on the right, and I'm going to go second and hit this calculate. So it's above the trace key, so second and then trace button. And we want to find a 0. We want to find when the equation is 0. So I'm going to hit number 2 or scroll down to it and hit enter. Okay, and now the really confusing part is you have to tell it where to look. So you have to set like a left-hand boundary and a right-hand boundary, and then it's going to look between those two boundaries. So if I'm focusing on this point on the right here, a left-hand bound somewhere to the left would be like 1 or 0 or even 1.5. Any of those numbers would work as left-hand bounds. So I'm going to just type. So it doesn't even seem like there's a spot to enter anything here. But if you just type 1, it'll say, hey, x1, and I hit enter. And that sets my boundary on the x-axis at 1. That's my left-hand boundary, and it's going to say it's going to search to the right of that. That's what this little arrow is saying up here. Okay, now it's asking for the right-hand bound, so anything over here, right? Like 3, 4, 5, 6, any of those work. So I'm just going to do 5. And again, I'm just going to type 5, even though there's no real spot to enter it. I'm going to type 5, and then it shows up like that, and I hit enter. Okay, and now I'm going to search to the left of that bound. So I'm searching between these two boundaries. And now I just hit enter. It says, do you want to guess? And I don't really want to guess, so I'm just going to hit enter. And it's going to snap right to the point and say x of 1.83 will make y 0. So that is one of our answers, and I'm just going to write it down, 1.83. I rounded it a little bit, but that x number will make this whole equation come out as 0. All right, and so then to get the other one, I got to do it again, right? So I got to do that same process again. So hopefully you get pretty good at it. Second in calc, going to do a 0. And then my left-hand bound has to be way over here. So -4 or -5 or something like that. So I'm going to type negative. Don't use the subtract key. Use a negative key here, -5. Enter. And then a right-hand bound can be really anything. You don't want to go way over here because then you'll be surrounding both points. So maybe something like -1 would work. Hit enter. Got the point surrounded. Hit enter again. And now instead of -4, it's going to be a little more precise. We're going to say -3.83 is our other answer. Okay, and so there are our two solutions to that quadratic equation. All right, so that's pretty much it, other than sometimes you have to zoom around if your answers don't show up. So I'll do one more example here where you have to zoom just to make sure you got it. All right, here's example 2. Again, I encourage you to try it on your own before watching the rest of this video. Okay, and we're going to solve by the graph method. Instead of factor, this would be a mess to factor, so we're going to graph it. All right, so first step is to bring over the 5x. So I'm going to write it in standard form with the highest exponents first. So I just minus 5x from both sides. Okay, now I'm going to type this in my calculator, and I would type it, like if you have a fraction, I would type it like this with parentheses. So we're going to go into y equals screen. Oops. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. At any rate, we're in the y equals screen, and we're typing in our equation. So I'm going to do parenthesis, then -1/2, 1 divided by 2, close the parenthesis, x squared. Use a little square key to save some time there. And then minus 5x plus 10. Okay, and so what we see here is there should be 2 answers, but we actually only see 1 currently. So what's happening is this is a parabola shape, all right? And so it must be upside down because it's -x squared. So we must be seeing this answer right here, right? And then the other one must be over here in the negative x's, right, on our x-axis there. So let's find the first one. I actually found it here, but I'll show you the steps again real quick. As you do second in calc, a 0, and then we should be able to use 1 and 2 as our bounds. So I'm going to use left-hand bound of 1, right-hand bound of 2. Cutting it a little close there, but should be all right. I don't want to guess, so I'm going to hit enter again. And actually I had the wrong answer on the screen. So 1.71 looks like the right answer for our first one. All right, so that's our first answer for x. And then we know the other one's going to be over here. So this is where I have to manipulate the window a little bit. So you got a couple options. One, you can hit zoom and zoom out, but I honestly don't love that option. What I'm actually going to change is just change my window and say, I know I need to go farther into the negative axis. So that the regular one is 10, negative 10 to 10. So I'm just going to move this over, say like, I'm going to try negative 20 and see if I can see it then. All right, so I'm going to type negative 20, go back to my graph. Okay, and now we can see, oh yeah, there's the full parabola, and we found our one answer here, and our other one's out here. All right, so to find that answer, I'm just going to do second and calc one more time, set my bounds. Sorry, I'm going to do 0 first, hit number 2 to get 0, and then I'm just going to set my negative bound out here. So I don't know, like negative 17 should work. So I'm out here to the left of it. Now I have to go somewhere to the right of it. So something like negative 5 should work. Okay, so I'm searching between those two lines, and then I'm going to hit enter, and it'll snap right to it. So negative 11.7 is my other answer. Okay, so that's just to show you that sometimes you have to change your window to find all your answers, right? And there should generally be 2. For an x squared, there should be 2, right? And if you ever want to get it back, you can go back into window and change it like we did before, or you can just hit zoom, and number 6 is the standard window, and that'll take you back to the regular window. Right, so when you're finding solutions in the calculator, it's good to know how to manipulate the window using window and zoom. All right, so that's it. So this was solving using the graph method. Again, it's a super powerful way to solve an equation. Hope it all makes sense. Thanks for watching.